This model didn't quite come out as nicely as I had wanted, but it's more than good enough for the gaming table, so I'm not going to change it now. To learn why, we have to delve into some old footage of when I built it, because friend of the channel, Amethyst Quill, permitted me the use of one of their Warlord Games biker gang models. This is a sprue from ProjectZ. The bike is just a couple of pieces, the main body is most of it with a separate exhaust, front fork and front wheel. And this is to make sure that the handlebars and the front fork casts properly, and it gives you the option of having steering, which is a nice feature. Not a lot of kind of motorcycle model kits have that as a thing you can do. And the bike is actually really finely detailed. It even has disc brakes visible. Getting that front wheel onto the fork was a little bit fiddly, but not so bad. The fork arms are fairly thin, but once they're in place, there's a little bit of keying to hold them in. I didn't glue the steering straight away because I wanted them to match the biker's arms, which we'll go on later. Speaking of the biker, there are plenty of parts, with quite a bit of variety in this kit, both male and female, in different clothes and different weapons, but I want to concentrate on the riding legs, because they generally come as a left and a right leg, so you can pair them up, but one option has a second left leg. Instead of being resting on the footrest, it's extended to be standing on the floor, and that is the more interesting one, and I chose that one. For the torso, there was a cool old style biker jacket, and I glued all of these bits together, making sure that that foot would go on the ground once it was assembled. I went through the bike's embellishments and picked out a couple of saddlebags that I thought just looked interesting, and I realised in the instructions there was that exhaust that I'd forgotten to do, so I put one of those on as well. Always test fit model pieces when you're trying to get them to line up, but it wasn't hard to get a left arm that was meant to go onto the handlebars to go onto the handlebars. I just had to wait a bit for it all to set. Now I did want to do one tiny itty bitty little bit of a conversion. A lot of the arms and hands in the set have weapons, which makes sense when you're fighting zombies, but I want to expand my collection of civilian, just everyday models, and having an everyday biker would be perfect for that. And so all I need to do is swap out a hand with a pistol for a hand that's empty. And to finish off the pose, I turned the head to point in the direction that the biker is leaning, and it sort of looks like he's spotted something off in the distance and he's parked to have a better look. I actually like how this is turning out so far, and so I put it on the shelf and forgot about it for several years, but recently I've picked it up and I got some paint on it. Similarly to some other bikes I've painted more recently, I stabbed some black paint all over the metalwork and I stippled it over the fairing as well. Now I didn't go to the effort of adding in the rust and dirt colours, as this should be a nice everyday bike that's better taken care of than something rolling around in the wasteland. I quickly stippled some dark metallic over the top, just on the metallic areas, and some brown for the leather pieces. As I went up the model, I picked out my base coats for each area. So the trousers got a blue, but to make sure I had a nice dark shadow colour to work from, I mixed some black into the blue for the first layer. Similarly with the leather jacket, got a brown and black mix, although it was quite light at first, and so I added some more black, and I went back and deliberately targeted the shadow areas of the jacket. And here comes my mistake, one of two reasons why I'm not happy with the end result of this model. After adding so much black and deliberately painting in the shadows of the clothes of the biker, I really didn't need a wash for the figure at all. I did want to black wash the bike because that's a really good way of defining the sculpt for all of the mechanical features of the bike, and that's going to look great. But in my rush to have this model painted, and I don't know why I was rushing, I just was, but in my rush as I was rushing, I ended up using the wash over the entire model, even where it wasn't needed, just because I'm using a wash the whole model, just that gone into autopilot kind of thing. With the wash dry, I started to work on the final touches. For the bike itself, it's mostly just picking out some bright silver with the metalwork. With the darker metallic under the wash and a nice bright touch of silver on top, this is actually a really easy way to paint some nice clean looking metalwork. But you might notice the second issue that I had starting to appear. The tip of my brush, and this is my nice sharp brush, or it was not so nice and sharp anymore. Now here's an interesting choice of paint, because it's not a paint. I bought this acid effect, not realising it was an effect paint, because I really wanted this British racing green hue of paint. Now I'm too stubborn to admit defeat, and I've painted with gloss paints and glazes for ages, so I know just what to do here. By putting on a fairly thick layer, but then putting the effort to ensuring that it was smoothly and evenly coating the piece, this will mostly dry quite nicely. But it will also end up just a little bit translucent, and so the stippled black underneath will give it a little bit more definition than it would otherwise have. Talking back around to the brush as I start to go over the highlights of the biker, I didn't realise it at the time, but the brush wasn't as sharp as it once was. It's possible that it's dirty, that is absolutely a thing that happens with brushes, but I have proof that these brushes get shorter as I use them. I really like this specific brand of brush, so I keep buying them, and a brand new one, nice and sharp, has longer bristles than an old one that doesn't hold a point anymore. And I'm pretty sure that's just as I use it, it wears away, and the little tip of each of the bristles snap away, and the part of the brush that forms the point just isn't present on the brush anymore, and so the brush as a whole doesn't form a point. Well, what this meant was that I wasn't able to pick out the fine lines of highlighting like I would usually want to do for a model like this, and often I was ending up painting extra parallel lines as the brush frays out into multiple spikes. So highlighting the jeans and jacket, and even worse when I got to the skin, it didn't go very well, and so I sort of gave up. Not in an exasperated surrender, more like a just can't be bothered, don't want to put the effort in to push this and finish it in a way that I would normally like. Although I did repaint the skin a little later because that was looking the worst of the whole thing, and the faces are often the focus point for a viewer. But you know, it's actually fine. It's not a bad paint job, just a more simple paint job than I would otherwise have liked. Not every model has to be a masterpiece, and if nothing else, I've learned that I don't need to put a wash over the entire model if only one part really warrants it. I should remember that in future. Strangely, even if I'm underwhelmed by my own skill at painting this model, I quite like how it's come out. It was only an hour's worth of work, and the character, the detail of the model, and the pose really quite look cool. I do like the model as a whole. And like I said, not every model has to be a masterpiece, and not every model needs a 10 or 15 hour paint job. But it is another model painted, and I'll remind you to check out the painting handle that I used in this video, link in the description for that. I'm ED-SKaR, always will be, and thank you very much for watching.